Welcome, Life Sciences, to another exciting life science lesson. What do we have on the cards today? Well, today we're going to start a new section called Gas Exchange. Now, it fits into the parts that have come before it, and I'm going to show you, give you a bit of idea of how it's come in, but we're basically looking at how are we going to bring in oxygen and bring out carbon dioxide. And that's the whole process that we're going to look at in the next couple of lessons. Okay, so very often when I use the word gas exchange, and I've put it on the board in brackets here, we often use the term breathe. Right? And now I'm going to show you it's not technically correct, but when we use the word gaseous exchange, it actually, we say it as we're breathing. How do I bring in oxygen? How do I take carbon dioxide out? So when we look at it today, we're going to see that maybe it's not technically correct, but that's really not a problem. That's actually what we're looking at. We're going to look at this whole process of how we breathe, and why we need to breathe. In this lesson today, we're going to look at a few concepts. We're going to start off with, this whole concept of what is gas exchange, what is breathing, what is cellular respiration, because very often we get those three terms mixed up, and they all actually mean totally different things. Then we're going to look at this whole concept of I need to breathe. Oxygen is quite important. So how am I able to breathe efficiently? What should my gas exchange surface, what should it be built like so in order that it can function properly? So we've got to keep that in the back of the mind as we're going on the sections beforehand. Then what we're also going to look at is we're going to have a look at how other organisms have to breathe. We're going to look at how plants breathe, right? We're going to look how fish breathe. We're going to look how the earthworm breathes. And I do this because I say to you, that's the term we're familiar with, but at the end of this, we're going to have to replace it with a new term that is obviously for life science far more correct. Okay, again, as I said, there's going to be quite a few new terms that are going to pop up. Listen carefully. How do I use them? Right? If you miss it, always make sure you go back. Terminology is really important for you to be able to understand the different concepts. If you're a little bit confused, remember, go to your textbook, go to any kind of notes that you might have available, highlight them, make a note of them, and make sure that you're able to put them into the right context. Okay, so now we're going to start. Now I'm going to start off with something that you might be familiar with. Now when we come to gas exchange, you need to understand one very important concept, and that is that all organisms need energy. Okay, so one of the things, all living things somehow or other need energy. But if we're looking at this concept, let's think about how we need energy. So why do I have photosynthesis on the board here? Because very simply, where does energy come from for us? The energy comes from the plants that photosynthesize. And they are able to take the energy from light, okay, and they trap it into what we call organic compounds. So during photosynthesis, when you guys did the one concept of photosynthesis, it's almost like we're doing a bit of a mini-series. We started off with photosynthesis because plants, they were able to trap this energy. I often say they make it, right? So they're the ones that are going to make it. And what they do is, when we saw over here, what they actually did here, they make glucose. So plants make glucose and they store it as starch, which is a carbohydrate. And plants can change this carbohydrate to lipids or proteins. What do I mean by that? Maybe, for example, if you want an avocado pear, that might be a plant that has a lot of fats in it. Or, for example, you might want to eat beans, right? What does beans do? They've converted the carbohydrates to proteins. So all of these, especially the starch and especially the lipids, what are they? They are this trapped energy, and all organisms need that. Then we looked at the whole process of digestion. Now, how does it relate? Energy was in the food that we eat. So first the plants made it, then we're going to eat it. And when we look at our digestive system, what happens at the end of the digestive system? The food that we eat gets broken down into a usable part. Now, I'm just going to obviously concentrate here on glucose. So the plants made it, we ate it, and the reason why we had to have this whole digestive process is because it's not in the form that my body can use. So at the end of digestion, right, what do I have? Any kind of carbohydrate that I had, it's going to be in this form. What is it? It is still trapped energy. Okay, so that's important that we understand the story. Then we looked at, right, when we look at it, I say this is, we have to use it. So the plants made it, we ate it, and during cellular respiration, what did we use? We took the glucose and we put it into, all right, where did that glucose go? It goes to our cells, and we have this organelle called the mitochondrion. And what does the mitochondrion do? It untraps. Here we go. Look at the word here, energy. It untraps energy and it releases ATP. Now, if we have a look at, as I said, it's like a mini series. Chapter 1, plants make it. Chapter 2, we eat it. Chapter 3, we use it. Now, what is cellular respiration? It's not breathing. All right, and it's not gaseous exchange. Cellular respiration is when I take the glucose and I untrap the energy. Okay, now where does the linkage come in for this program today? Here it comes. I always say cellular respiration has terms and conditions. And what do I mean by that? Very simply, for me to make this ATP, I have to have oxygen. I have to have oxygen, okay? So what is it? So what is gaseous exchange and breathing? I need to have this oxygen in. Now let's have a look at the last part of my, all right, of my little formula over here. I make carbon dioxide. And carbon dioxide is not good for my body, and I have to get rid of it. Which then leads me to this concept, gas exchange. First of all, it's the diffusion. And what do we know about diffusion? Very important. It's when things move, all right, from a high concentration to a low concentration. And what is going to happen during gaseous exchange is quite simply, I'm going to exchange oxygen. Oxygen is going to come into my body, and carbon dioxide is going to go out. I exchange. I want oxygen in, I want carbon dioxide out. Okay, so have a look there. This is picture exactly, okay? I want carbon dioxide out, I want oxygen in, and I'm going to go through a cell, a kind of surface. Now, when we talk about breathing, and I say this is the word we use all the time, breathing is the physical process. Me breathing in, breathing out. It's when my muscles do the work. So when I talk about gas exchange actually is the whole process of breathing in, gases exchanging, going to the cells for cellular respiration, exchanging gases again, exchanging gases in the lungs, and then breathing out. So it's this whole process that we are going to look at. Now, when I look at the process of gaseous exchange, there are things that I need to bear in mind. Remember what I said? How I'm going to make it a really, really good gaseous exchange system. Now, if you have a look at this, I don't know if you can remember, this is called squamous epithelium. Now, squamous epithelium is thin and it's moist. And when it's thin and moist, all right, and it's also very smooth. And this is going to be very important when I need to be able to bring oxygen in and out. Okay, so these are the requirements each time. Number one, I need to have a large surface area. What do I mean by that? Guys, making these bubbles means that there is more of a surface area than one single bubble. Now, when we look at the structure of the lungs, we're going to see where this is going to occur. So we've got to keep this in mind all the time. Number two, it must be thin and permeable. One layer in the lungs, one layer in the blood vessel. Look here. One layer. We're going to keep this in mind because we're going to come back when we look particularly at the lungs. Number three must be moist. Guys, ever gone to a window and breathed out onto a window? It's nice and it's moist. Right? The reason why is lots of water, right? Like water vapor in your lungs. Because what's going to happen? Oxygen must dissolve into the water to form a solution, and then it pops into the blood. And what is the blood? Water. Okay, why do I need oxygen and carbon dioxide? I need it to do stuff. And how do I get it around the body? I need blood. Right, it doesn't help if I breathe in the oxygen and it's got absolutely nowhere to go. Right, so I need to get it to the cells and I need to get it back out again. This whole concept of in and out. Okay, well ventilated. What does that mean? It means in, oxygen, out, carbon dioxide. So I must be able to get oxygen in and I must be able to get carbon dioxide out. Okay, and one of the requirements, and it's not always necessary, but for us it's going to be, is that we need to have, our lungs are quite important. Actually, they're really important. So we need to have them well protected. This is not necessarily a function in all the organisms that we're going to look at, but we're going to see there for us, ribs, well protected is going to be definitely part of what we're going to need. Okay, guys, I'm afraid we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Welcome back, Life Sciences. I hope you took a nice little break. Remember, it's important just to rest a little bit, get all the frustration out, go and have something to drink, a glass of water, walk around just to get the blood flowing. Otherwise, it helps you to concentrate. Okay, what did we look like? What did I look like? Okay, let's start. What did we do in the first segment? We looked at this concept, right, of gas exchange. And we said when we're looking at things, right, photosynthesis, we made the food. When we digested the food, we ate it and we broke it down. Cellular respiration is where we untrapped that energy. And we're now looking at the process where for cellular respiration to occur, it was very necessary that I got oxygen. Where did I get it from? How does it get into my body? How does it get into my cells? How does it get there so I can respire, cellular respire? Then once I've cellular respired, I make carbon dioxide. I need to get it out. It changes into an acid in my body, and I need to get it out as soon as I can. Okay, in this segment, what we're going to look at, we're going to start looking how other organisms, okay, we're kind of like building up until we get to us, right, the humans. We're going to look how other organisms have, how they are able to gas exchange, how they're able to take this whole oxygen in and carbon dioxide out. You'll see the examples that we've used are things or structures, organisms that you should be very familiar with. Once again, we're going to look at a few, new structures. Maybe the words are familiar to you, but make sure you understand your terminology. Okay, so guys, now basically what happens is while we're looking at it, is that when gaseous exchange occurs, it's all going to depend on certain factors That depends on how an organism is going to get oxygen in and it's going to get carbon dioxide out. Okay, guys, now this whole concept of surface area to volume ratio. And basically what it means is organisms that are really small have got a really small body, which means they also need less. So what happens is their process of doing things is actually very simple. Then what happens is as an organism gets bigger, right? They're bigger, they look like they have a greater surface area, but they don't actually, right? They've got a much greater surface area, but they're not able to get in the things that they need properly. So what they're going to require is they're going to need specialized, and this is where systems come in. Breathing systems, gaseous exchange, urinary, a blood, a transport system. So as an organism gets bigger, so it needs to be a little bit more developed and a little bit more complex in order to do the things that it needs to do. So when we're looking at how organisms are going to exchange these gases, remember, whole thing, oxygen in, carbon dioxide out. We always look at that when we look at gas exchange. It's going to have, an effect on how big is the organism. It will have an effect on how it needs to be able to bring in oxygen, how it needs to take out carbon dioxide. Its form, its covering, you're going to see. Let's, for example, we look at an insect. An insect has got a really hard covering, yet it can't get oxygen into its body. It might be small, but it's going to come up with a different way. And obviously, environment at which it lives. What do I mean by that? Say, for example, we look at the fish. It lives in water, right? And there's less water available, right, than in air. So we're going to have to come up with a different system of how we're going to get this oxygen in and this carbon dioxide out. So if I have a look over here, this is a single-celled cell called an amoeba. It's very small, it's got a very large volume to surface area, and what happens, it's very simple. Exchange of gases occurs by diffusion. Oxygen comes in, carbon dioxide goes out across the cell membrane. It doesn't need any kind of special. So no special organs whatsoever. So what will happen is when I get bigger, so for example, small aquatic organisms, if you look here, guys, can you remember? These are flatworms, right? Platyhelminthes, so they're nice and flat. Right, these are all my cnidarians. Okay, we did it when we looked at animal diversity. And all of these are flat. They live in water. They're very simple. And all that happens is oxygen goes in, carbon dioxide goes out. They don't have any, special organs in which they need, to do this gas exchange. Remember, most of these are parasites. They're flat. They just sit there and they suck up all your food, right? And the oxygen and the carbon dioxide can come out quite freely. However, as we get bigger and more complex, so we're going to have special structures that are necessary to get this oxygen and this carbon dioxide in. Now, as I said to you, quite important when we look at these large animals, their environment, okay? Is it water? Is it terrestrial? We also need to look at how active they are, right? If they just couch potatoes, they're not going to cellular respire as much as if they were able to. Okay, so now we're going to the first thing we're going to look at is how do plants gaseous exchange? Now, you guys say, oh, that's what? Plants can breathe? Right, guys? Yes. Right, plants, what is gaseous exchange? It's not breathing. Plants need to get oxygen into and out of the cell. Now, if I go over and look here, this is the stomata. Right, you would have done it when you did plant tissue. And stomata are little holes at the bottom of the leaf. And what can happen? Carbon dioxide can go out or in, remember, for photosynthesis, and oxygen is going to come out. So there we're going to have this gaseous exchange again. These are called lenticels, and they are little cells. They are breathing pores on stems. There, they're little cells. Oxygen can come in, and plants can breathe. I'm going to go to this one. This is the leaf. So when I think of the leaf, how does the leaf, all right, these are the requirements. Why is it thin and permeable? Guys, look here. Cuticle at the top. Very thin layer at the top called the epidermis. Right, nice and thin. Large surface areas. Wow, look at these huge, big, elongated palisade cells. You would have done this when you did, all right, plant organs. What else do I need? Well ventilated. What does that mean? Guys, oxygen and carbon dioxide can come in and out through the stomata. It's a plant, so it doesn't have a transport system, right? And it doesn't need to be well protected. And even inside here, what we're going to have is water vapor, so it's going to be moist. So again, a plant also needs to gas exchange. All of those things are going to be, all right, characters that they also need. The earthworm. Now, you didn't study the earthworm in detail, but you did look at it when you looked at animal diversity. And the earthworm is an annelida. It was a segmented worm. Now, if we think of an earthworm is nice and moist. All right, so let's think of that picture. And I'm going to go on to when we think of all these things. So let's start here. Thin and permeable. Very thin layer of skin over here. Okay? Earthworms are not very big. And what else on top? They're nice and moist. They live in the moist soil. Right? They got to stay where it's wet. So we've got nice, thin, we've got moist, large surface area. Check here. The earthworm can breathe over its own body. So not breathe, gaseous exchange, all right, can occur over the whole body. So it has a really large surface area. Now, when we talk about well ventilated, what do we mean? Bringing oxygen in and out. Right? So it doesn't have a breathing system, but it has more of a transport system. So well ventilated here, not so much in the concept of getting it in and out. Transport system, definitely. Guys, have a look here. How do earthworms get everything around the body? They have a blood system. They have a heart, they've got vessels, and it's going to get it throughout. Well protected, not so much, all right? They're very soft, they're very squishy. If you stand on them, you're probably going to kill them, right? But they're usually deep down in the soil. They're not very high up. So their body might not protect them, but where they stay might be protected. Okay, so when we're looking at those things, you need to have an idea of how different kinds of organisms are going to understand gaseous exchange. Okay, guys, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Welcome back, Life Sciences. I hope you enjoyed your break. As I always say to you, it's really important just to get the blood flowing, to stand up, shake the legs, right, and just get the mind a little bit of time just to take a rest. We're looking at this concept of gas exchange. And as I said to you, we very wrongly call it breathing. And we can't call it breathing. So when we're talking about gas exchange, we're looking at the exchange of gases. So we're looking at how different organisms, all right, were able to exchange oxygen and carbon dioxide. That's what we're talking about. We are not able to use the other gases that are in the atmosphere. We want to get oxygen in and we want to get carbon dioxide out. And that's the same for all living organisms. Remember, all living organisms, they need to cellular respire. And during cellular respiration, oxygen is needed and carbon dioxide is released. And we need to see different organisms have different ways in which they are going to do that. when we're looking at how the different organisms do these, we're looking at, if we can recap, last time we looked at the whole concept of how plants gas exchange. And as I said, that's why it's incorrect to say the word breathe, because plants can't breathe, but they are able to exchange gases. And we looked at that whole concept of leaves, right, and little lenticels on the plants, where what do? They took in gases. But when it comes to plants, very often they're a little bit different to us, because they take in a lot more carbon dioxide and they release oxygen. So it might be a different in and an out, but it's still an exchange of gases. Then we looked at how, all right, certain kinds of organisms, and we looked at how the earthworm, right, was able to take in oxygen. Earthworms are nice and slimy and moist, and that beautiful skin is just well enough for it to be able to take in, all right, those different oxygen and carbon dioxide. And each time, right, remember when you're looking at something, how those efficient gaseous exchange points, how is the organism made to make gas exchange so much more efficient? Now we're going to carry on with that concept, and we're going to look at 2 more other organisms. Right, guys, so when we look at the next organism we're going to look at is insects. All right, and everybody who, all right, when I look at insects, I don't like insects. The only nice insect that I know, all right, is going to be a ladybug. Insects give me the chrills. But we're going to look at how insects take in oxygen and how they release carbon dioxide. Now, when we look at insects, insects are really small, and that means that they should be able to just nice and easy by diffusion, but oh no, what do insects have? They have an exoskeleton, and that's usually some kind of outer covering, right, that's going to be very hard, and what happens is oxygen can't come in through the skin. It's pretty much the same as we have. So it's got to have, now for the first time, we're going to start to see a special, and hear the word, a more developed and efficient system. Now I'm going to show you the system briefly, but you're actually going to be surprised when we look at the human section, how many of the names they have in common. Now this is my insect over here. Now what happens is, if you ever take a look very carefully on the body over here, so this is when we look at the insect, that's the head, that's the thorax, and this is the abdomen. Now on the side of the abdomen, if you look very carefully, all right, are what we call spiracles. Okay, here we go. Here's the spelling of them. They are called spiracles, and very simply what they are holes, okay? So if you look, they've got a little flap, and what the insect can do is, this little hole can open and obviously close. Now when we get to insects, insects are really busy. They're crawling all over the show, they are flying, so they're going to need a lot of oxygen. So what is going to happen here is, when those spiracles open, oxygen is going to move into the body. Now, it's not as simple as that. I want you to have a look. It's actually quite a system that's very simple, similar to ours. You don't have to worry too much about all of the different functions, but look here. It's what is called a tracheal system. And when we look at our system, we also have a trachea. And basically what we're looking at is that insects actually have a series of tubes, right? So they have all of these tubes that when the spiracle opens, what happens is oxygen goes into these spiracles, it travels along these trachea, and it gets all the oxygen to the tissue. Now I hope that you notice that there's something here. There's no blood. Now, when we looked at the transport system, insects have an open circulatory system. What does that mean? They don't have blood, and they don't have blood cells. That means the oxygen comes in here, and it diffuses and bathes directly into the tissue. I don't know if you guys have ever stepped on an insect. An insect, when you step on it, is never red. All right, it's yellow. And that basically means the oxygen goes in. It doesn't have red blood cells. It doesn't have blood. The oxygen goes in, and it just bathes, like the whole body is just like this. I can't say soup. It's called the hemicole. And all the oxygen is bathed in here. So it doesn't actually have a transport system. So when we think about that, when we look at an efficient gaseous exchange, it doesn't have, all right, a transport system, but they're small. Does it really need it? It's constantly got this oxygen coming in. So we're going to find that in gaseous exchange, there's this trachea. So what happens? What happens in the tissue? Cellular respiration. Carbon dioxide moves from a high concentration to a low concentration, back into these spiracles, and out it goes into the atmosphere. So we're starting to see, for the very first time, we're starting to see a system that is far more highly developed. We actually have serious special features that we need to have. So guys, as I said again, each time you look at it, you've got to keep in the back of your mind, I'm going to go over, all right, the requirements again later with you, just so that you can, all right, know the importance of this. So thin and permeable, what do we mean by that? So when we look at the trachea, what does thin and permeable mean? The thin and permeable probably means that here the cells, the trachea, are very thin. It's an insect. It cannot have really, all right, thick trachea like we are going to have. But the surface area is not so much, all right, thin and permeable, really in the tissues, and not so much the organs, the cells. So I suppose I could put a tick there because it's going to go directly to the cells. A large surface area, it's going to bathe all of the cells. We don't need to travel through a certain area. It's going to be moist. The cells are moist. Yes, they're bathed in like a tissue fluid. Well ventilated. Yes, what do we have? We have spiracles. It uses its body, all right? Insects, the abdomen actually moves out and in. It doesn't have them, it's got like slight muscles that breathes in, breathes out, breathes in, breathes out, the actual breathing system. So yes, it is well ventilated. Right, transport system, not here. Right, doesn't have blood, and it doesn't have, all right, all these vessels taking it around. But as I said, it's not really a big insect, so everything's going around the middle. Well protected, well, it's got a hard body covering. So we're going to say that probably it is well protected. The crunch, I don't know if you've ever stepped on one, even a spider, all of those things. They're hard, they're tough, and that outer layer protects them nicely. Okay, now we're going to go to, the fish. Now I'm sure as I tell you the fish, you guys, yes, I know what those are. They live in water, right? So what they're definitely not going to have is they're not going to have any kind of lungs. So what we see now, remember we said to you, it's the environment in which they live. So now a fish, guys, this is a problem. There's less oxygen in the water, the same volume of water, than there is in air. So what we're going to find now, fish need to come up with a special system, right, that is going to help them to breathe. Now, if you have a look over here, if you've ever skinned a fish or caught a fish and had a look, what color is this? Guys, it's red, 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 which means that the gills are filled with blood. Now, I want to show you this little animation that's happening. You can see on the board as we go. Now, those gills, can you see how these are all red? These are all blood. And what the fish does is, the fish uses its mouth. All right, so guys, the only thing that's going to happen is it's going to happen in its head. No other parts of the body. So what will happen is water moves in. I don't know if you've ever seen a fish. A fish is opening its mouth, closing its mouth. That's its breathing. Okay, that's breathing. It's physically having to open, bring in water, and then close. So now look what happens. It's nice. So as it opens its mouth, the water rushes in. And look at all those thousands of little, gills that is filled with blood. Now have a look here. It also goes through the gills, kind of got like these little grooves that goes through the gill. So what happens is when it goes the mouth, the water moves over the gills, and what takes up? Oxygen is in high concentration to low concentration, and the fish is going to have a blood system. So it's going to go into the blood. And when it closes its mouth, what happens over here? All right, opens its mouth. When it closes its mouth, the water goes out. All right, and what do you think went into the water? Carbon dioxide. So when the fish opens, water goes in, bathes the gills, the blood, gaseous exchange occurs, oxygen goes into the fish, carbon dioxide goes out, and closes its mouth, and it's got a little slit over here. It's called an apiculum or a gill slit. It opens and the water comes out. He doesn't swallow the water. Open, close, go out. So as you can imagine, right, when we look at the fish, when we have a look at all the different things, are they thin and permeable? Look at these. There's like millions, there's thousands of them. Small little thin, all right, gills. Yes. Do they have a large surface area? Definitely. I don't have one solid one. I've got lots and lots of them. Okay, I don't think moistness is going to be a problem because it lives in water. Is it well ventilated? Yes. The mouth moves up and down and it comes in. Does it have a transport system? Very much so, because what do I have a lot of? Blood. And is it well protected? Well, it is within the head, right? And it is within the body of the cell, but it hasn't got that really strong protection. The apiculum is quite hard, but not that really strong protection that we're going to find when we look at, all right, when we look at us. Now, the last organism that we're going to look at, and we're going to keep that for, right, the next lesson, we're going to look at how mammals undergo gas exchange. And that is us, all right? We need energy all the time. We are warm-blooded, endothermic, and we need a lot of energy, which means we're going to need a lot of oxygen. So we need to have a really high developed system. So next time I see you, we're going to have a look at the human lungs. But that's all for now. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be right back. Welcome back, Life Sciences, from your short little break. As I say to you, always important, get up, shake those legs, shake those arms, get the muscles going, get the oxygen going, because that's what we're talking about, gaseous exchange system. Right, just to recap, we looked at all of the ways that make an efficient gaseous exchange system. We looked at the thin, the moist, the permeable, and then we looked at how different organisms gaseous exchange, because very often when we think of gaseous exchange, we just think of us as mammals or humans that do it, and we look to see how plants need gaseous exchange for photosynthesis and cellular respiration, how the earthworm was able to look at it, how the insect, and then how the fish, some organism living in water has to have a different kind of approach to how they get oxygen in and out. What we're going to do is we're going to look at a few questions that we could probably ask you on this section, right? Just small little questions that maybe could pop up in your tests and your exams, just to give you a bit of a backbone to see how you would answer these questions. Right, our first question over here, as you can see, is a diagram of an earthworm. And it says to you, study the diagram below and answer the questions that follow. Now remember, it's not going to be specifically about the earthworm, but it is going to do with gaseous exchange. Now the question is, how does the earthworm meet the requirements of an efficient gaseous exchange surface? And guys, it's just ask you to discuss two ways. So basically, it's an open-ended question. There's a way that you could do it in the first one, all right, but you need to link it back to the earthworm. So I'm going to go with number one. The skin is moist. All right, so there we go. We said that moistness, being able to, right, not be dry out is really important. And when I say discuss, you must tell me the skin is moist for 1 mark. And why is that important? And that is because oxygen must be in a solution in order for it to be able for gaseous exchange to occur. I'm going with the second one I'm going to go with here is a good transport system, and the reason why is because the transport system here is quite obvious. It has a heart, it has blood vessels, and you can see they're directly underneath the skin. So what will happen is we will have a good transport section. The oxygen and the carbon dioxide will allow to be transported to all parts of the body. All right, another thing you could have maybe spoken about, linking with the skin. Right, I'm going to go over here. Right, probably you could have also said that the skin is thin, because that's what it is. And what do we need? Because the skin is thin, all right, it's permeable, and that will make sure that it's quick for oxygen and carbon dioxide, all right, to be able to gaseous exchange. So when I look at those, it's thin, it's large surface area. Maybe that could have been another one, a large surface area. Number 4, and how do we know it's a large surface area? All right, gases can dissolve over the whole body of the earthworm. There we go. So any of those, B-O-D-Y, all right, any of those you could have discussed. But remember, when I say discuss, I mean you must give me the how it is and why. You've got to give me the 2 reasons. You can't just explain the one. Here is just simple questions that we could put out to you. The first one, how are insects adapted for, right, the prevention of desiccation? Desiccation means to dry out, right? And how are insects prevented from this? Guys, they have got that chitinous outer layer. And that is why they needed the the whole tracheal system. That they have this exoskeleton. And what happens is their body, there's no oxygen and carbon dioxide can't get through. Can't diffuse. So their whole body structure, if you look at it, we said we've got to take into consideration what the body structure is. Now, the next question, how do they maintain a moist gaseous exchange surface? Now, remember, these are all characteristics of a gaseous exchange system. And when we look at the insects, right, insects have got this tracheal system. And what happens is they have these little, right, tracheoles. So the same as our, all right, the same as our little bronchioles, they've got these smaller little branches called the tracheoles. And inside their branches, it is moist. All right, there is a form of water vapor there, all right, and it's right near the cells, and the cells, all right, also have a layer of fluid around them. So that is how they are able to have that gaseous exchange system that is going to be moist. As we said, very important part of an effective gaseous exchange. Okay, guys, now this is quite a, I'm not going to lie to you, it's quite a challenging question that we've put in here, and it's a question on the fish. Now let's read what it says. Fish have gills, right, from which blood rich in carbon dioxide diffuses from capillaries. And here we see with a diagram, they've got the gills. All right, it says, so the carbon dioxide diffuses from the capillaries in the gills in the water passing over, all right, the gills. So what happens is we're looking at this whole concept that oxygen is going to go into the gills and the carbon dioxide is going to go out. So here we have, the next is the diagram, shows the way in which water flows over the gills. So we have the concept, I'm explaining the concept because it's going to be interesting or important when we look at the questions. So the water comes in, all right, the mouth is open, and the gills over here are going to be, well, the apicular cavity is going to be closed. And then what happens is when the mouth closes, those gills are going to go open and the water is going to go out there. Now we have a diagram where we link. The graph below shows the changes in pressure, all right, in the buccal. Now what does buccal mean? Buccal is another word for mouth. So over here, this buccal is going to be mouth. Okay, and the apicular cavity. So we're going to have 1 here is the mouth, and 2 is going to be the apicular cavity over here. So that's this part when it opens and closes. So basically what is going to happen, guys, is when the mouth opens, the pressure is going to increase, all right, in the buccal cavity, and when the mouth closes, the pressure is going to increase in the apicular cavity. But we're going to have a look now. Okay, now we need to explain. It says, use the graph to explain the relationship, all right? It doesn't ask you to explain what is happening. It's asking to see, do you see a relationship between, or a trend, all right, or another pattern, right? That's how I often say that you can use it, between the pressure in the buccal cavity and the pressure in the apicular cavity. Guys, have a look over here, all right? So the pressure is very simple. When the pressure in the buccal cavity rises, so does the pressure in the apicular cavity. And when the pressure in the buccal cavity decreases, so the pressure in the apicular cavity decreases. So they have a direct relationship with that. How would I write it? Very simple. As pressure in the buccal, I'm just going to put the BC cavity increases, so does the pressure in the apicular cavity increase. Right, quite a difficult question that is going in there. All right, so guys, I'm afraid that is all we're going to have time for today. So please go over your notes again, make some summary notes of what you need to do. What was our main focus today? Very important. What are the requirements of a gaseous exchange system? All those points were really important that you were able to understand them. And can I use those points in any kind of organism or system that I'm given? Can I see how each of them is going to be efficient? Well, I'm afraid that's all we have time for today. Until next time, cherry bye.